Hi guys, this is a recap of season 2, episode 149 of Beyond the Gates. But before we get to the recap, if you've been to this channel or maybe you're new to the content, feel free to leave a comment, and subscribe. So how I like to do the recaps on this page, I will give you a character and then I'll explain what they're doing in the scenes. The scenes that I talk about in this video may not be in the exact same order in which they aired in the episode. I like to go from my least favorite or least impactful to most favorite or most impactful scenes. And then if I have any comments about the episode, I will put those at the end of the video. So without further ado, let me tell you what these characters have been up to. So I'll start with Kyle, Ted, Carlton, Martin, and Smitty. Okay, so we know Martin had this charity basketball game, and we know that Kyle, Ted, and Carlton were going to be on the team. So today we find out that Smitty actually ended up filling in for the last slot because they couldn't find anybody to, be the other person to play on this team. So they tried Jacob, but Jacob was busy. Isaiah was busy. And then we know that Andre turned it down. He couldn't do it, or he didn't want to do it. And so they're just having this back and forth conversation about, how terrible Smitty is. And, they talk about how, good that Kyle played. And there's a moment where Martin says that Ted vouched for his, basketball game when it comes to Kyle. And he said that, so any charity events he has, when it comes to basketball and all of that, he's going to be looking for Kyle to be on his team. Okay, so you have another moment where Smitty talks about, getting his payment for being in the, on the basketball team. And so Kyle is like, I didn't know we were getting paid for this. And Smitty says that Martin, agreed to prepare food for him for a week, and Carlton jokes about it being sandwiches. And Martin says it's because, he's so busy, but he actually can cook. And, Smitty talks about this pasta that Martin makes. And Martin tells Carlton that he probably could have some, if he wasn't, acting like that or whatever. And Carlton makes this face. So Martin and Smitty end up leaving. And then Kyle is getting his stuff together. And Ted wants to know if Kyle is going back to Garland. And Kyle says that, he's going to spend some time with Nicole. And then Ted says, yes, I'm going to have lunch at Orphy Jean's with Shanice. And so then Kyle leaves. And Ted wants to know how, Carlton is so calm hearing that, Kyle is getting ready to go, spend some time with Nicole. And so Carlton and Ted have this conversation about, him and Nicole making this, agreement that, he bowed out and all of that. So it wasn't going to work. And, Carlton comes to the realization that maybe he waited too long and to try to get to Nicole. She put him in the friend zone. And then they have this conversation about had he got with her earlier, she probably wouldn't have been with Ted. Then Ted finally tells Carlton that he's wanted to hit him during this whole time, but he's just been kind of keeping it together. And, they also talk about Shanice and all of that. Then they get back on the fact that Kyle is a really good guy. And then that's when Kyle walks in and he overhears them say that. And, Kyle is glad that they, still care about Nicole and all of that. And Carlton says, we're still around, and so you can't hurt Nicole pretty much. And Kyle says he really didn't plan to. So we have a moment with Nicole and Vanessa, and they are at the country club. They're having lunch, and Nicole and Vanessa are talking about Joey's sister. And Vanessa is, telling Nicole that she doesn't understand why Joey doesn't want her to, push the fact of him rekindling, his relationship with his sister. And he keeps telling her to stay away from his sister, but she's saying that, she's a good person, and she says even Danny thinks she's a good person. And so Nicole tells her, if Joey, is telling you to stay away from his sister, then maybe you should listen to him because that's his sister. And so Vanessa brings up the fact that, her and Deanna didn't have a relationship, and she didn't know how, she would take it if they, didn't rekindle their relationship. And so she's saying that Joey knows a different version of Heather, from back when they were young. And, she just doesn't want him to miss out on the opportunity to have a relationship with the only family member that he has. And Nicole just, tries to tell Vanessa that, he's not going to tell you everything, but that comes with being with him. You got to accept the fact that you're not going to know about everything that, he's, dealing with and everything. And if he's keeping, the reasonings from you, then it must be something, bad. So we get a scene with Joey and his guy there at the casino, and he's had this guy and Randy looking, for clues or whatever, following his sister, trying to figure out, what she's doing there. And so the guy tells him that, she went to the hotel and she didn't come down until this morning, and he sat in the lobby and waited for her. He says that she's getting her nails done right now, so I think Randy was watching her. And so Joey gets upset because you spent the whole time in the lobby. She could be doing other stuff. He wants eyes on her. And so he gets really frustrated. He tells him, they're going to have to figure out why she's here, and he wants to know now. Okay, so we have a moment with Bill and Haley, and they're being flirtatious, and Haley gets in the bed with Bill, and she says that she could stay, she could just stay there with him. And then Shanice walks in, and she tells, her that she can't, stay. And she explains to them that, Bill has heart surgery. He has a pacemaker pretty much, and he probably shouldn't do anything that is going to make his heart rate and everything go up in the moment. And so they get mad at Shanice, and he's saying that his doctor didn't tell him, that he wouldn't be able to be intimate and all of that. So he's getting upset. And then Haley finally agrees with Shanice. She says that she didn't know what she would do if something happened to him. But also at the same time, she's smiling because now she knows that, he can't do anything that's going to make his heart rate go up, that it can seriously hurt him. And so finally Shanice, gets them to, get away from each other pretty much. But as soon as Shanice leaves, they get back, Haley gets back into the bed with Bill. Okay, so we have a moment where Nicole and Vanessa, they're still at the country club eating, and Martin and Smitty come up, and then we find out that they actually won the charity fundraiser. And so Nicole and Vanessa, they congratulate them. Later, Martin and Smitty, they go back to their house, and Martin wants to go out of town. He wants to go on vacation because, the kids are gone. Tyrell is getting ready to go to college. And so he wants to do a vacation with just him and Smitty. And Smitty says he can't go. There's so many things going on. They have to help Tyrell and all of that. Then Smitty finally says that the reason why he doesn't want to go is because he's not done with this impaler case. When he got the offer for the crime podcast, it brought up the feelings of wanting to complete the case, and he can't get off of it until the person who is responsible is been taken down. So then we have a moment with Ted and Carlton, like I said, they had this conversation about, Nicole and, her being with Carlton. Okay, so we have a moment with Ashley and Shanice. And Ashley and Shanice are at the nurse's station, and Shanice tells Ashley about, Bill and Haley and all of that situation, and how she had to, keep them off of each other. And at first, Ashley is grossed out because, that's Naomi's dad. And she tells Ashley that, she's probably going to have to go in there and check on them again because, they're probably going to try something again. And so Shanice tells Ashley that she's leaving. She's going to lunch with Ted. She's going to meet him at Orphy Jean's. Okay, we have a moment in the country club with Nicole and Ted. And Nicole is congratulating Ted on the win. And then they have the conversation about, Nicole just being with Kyle now and being in a relationship and, things going well with Shanice and all of that. They, just kind of catching up, and they're, pretty much being happy for each other in the moment. Then we have a moment, Nicole goes back to her seat with Vanessa, and Kyle comes up and, he's greeting Nicole, and Vanessa hears Kyle call Nicole his girlfriend. And so Vanessa's like, oh, so that's what we're calling, you guys are calling each other now. And she tells Kyle that she knows that, he was going to be the one all along, and she's happy about that. She also says that she met Noah, and then Nicole says, Kyle's not going to say anything, but what do you think of Noah? And so Vanessa says that she thinks he's a great guy, that Kyle did a good job raising him pretty much. And anybody that's making Deanna smile, she's happy with that. And Kyle says that he wants to, keep Noah close. So anybody that's going to keep Noah close by, he's happy with that. Okay, so Vanessa says, I can take the hint, and she gets up and leave. And then so it's just Nicole and Kyle, and Kyle wants to commemorate their newfound relationship, and he doesn't want to do anything that is going to be too forward. They're still kind of taking it slow and everything, no strings attached, pretty much, even though they're in a relationship. And so Nicole is trying to guess, like, what he's thinking of, doing for their newfound relationship. And he says that Noah is going to have an open mic night, and he wants to know if she would come to help heckle Noah. And so Nicole is like, you want that to be our first date? And so he says, Noah does a couple love songs, so it's probably going to be some dancing and me gazing into your eyes and all of that. And so Nicole agrees to come to Noah's open mic night. Okay, so Vanessa is finally at the casino with Joey, and they're still going back and forth when it comes to what he won't tell her about Heather. And he just says, that she's just going to have to trust him on it, and if it's a problem, then, then she, can walk away or whatever. And but he's not going to tell her. And so she finally comes back around and says, being without him is worse than her not knowing and all of that. So that's pretty much with them. We get a moment with Eva and Leslie at Orphy Jean's, and Leslie is talking about Eva and, everything she's been through with the scar and all of that. And Eva says that Isaiah really helped her make her feel better. And, Leslie talks about how good Isaiah is. And then they get on the conversation with about, Leslie going to Ted to tell her, tell him what, the conversation and all of that she had with Eva about her scar. And, Leslie is like, your dad loves you, and then he's also a plastic surgeon, so, he would be a person to talk to. And then Eva gets on the conversation of, wanting to know if her mom has somebody to love her like she does with Isaiah. She says her mom deserves that. And she wants to know if Detective Malone is really, trying to like be with her like that. And she, explains their relationship. When they're together, they're just, having fun pretty much. And Eva thinks that Detective Malone is a placeholder because her mom thinks that she's going to get back with Ted. And Eva tells Leslie that, you should let that go because, you're delusional. You deserve to be with somebody that actually loves you. And she tells Eva like that as many times as he's turned her away, he's actually came to her. So she's not delusional. Leslie gets a little offended with Eva because she's like her daughter shouldn't be telling her anything about relationships. But Eva says she just wants what's best for her mom, and she feels like her mom deserves better than what, it's been going on. Okay, and so they're talking about Ted still, and Ted walks in to Orphe Jean's, and Leslie says that, maybe, he knew that they were talking about him because then he just popped up. And Eva says, oh, we were talking about, our conversation about the scar. And then Leslie tries to insert herself in the conversation, and Ted kind of cuts her off, and he says he's talking to his daughter. And he asks Eva if she's been to a therapist. And Eva says no, she's been doing well. And he says, well, if you ever feel the way, that you were feeling before, then, let me know, talk to me. And then he lets them know that he's going to go get a table because he's meeting Shanice for lunch. Okay, so, he goes to get the table. Shanice comes in, and Shanice is telling Ted about Bill and Haley and the whole situation. And at first Ted is like, okay, but like he would do the same thing. They've had moments in his office, but she reminds him that Bill had a major illness and a major event, and so he understands. And then Ted tells her that he wants to get closer, and so he wants to meet her brothers. And she says that she's, doesn't think that he's ready to meet her brothers. All the other guys that she's dated, they say they're ready and all of that, but then they don't, get along with her brothers. So, that's pretty much their entire conversation. And, then we see Eva, she leaves her mom at the table, and Leslie makes a phone call to Detective Malone, and she leaves him a message, and she says, if he's serious about her, then he would take her out, on a date to dinner or something, he would put in effort. And so she leaves that voicemail. And then we get a moment with Bill and Haley, and like I said, they're being intimate. And Ashley is at the nurse's station at this point. And she sees on the monitor that Bill's heart rate is really going, crazy at this point. And so she goes into the room, and, they're trying to be a little intimate. And so she covers her face with the iPad, and then she tells them to stop. And Bill is upset. He says he's checking himself out of the hospital. And Ashley tells him, his doctor haven't, given him permission to leave. And he's talking about him being a lawyer, and he knows his rights and all of that. And he wants Ashley to, fill out the paperwork for him to be discharged. And so Ashley makes some comment. Well, Haley makes this comment about Ashley, that's not being a part of her job. And then Ashley says, well, something along the line of Haley didn't even have a job anyway or whatever. And so, like I said, Bill is upset and all of that. And so Ashley goes to make a phone call, and she tells, whoever is on the phone to just come up. And so we find out later on that it's the security guard. And she's asking the security guard to escort Haley out of the room and out of the hospital, and she can't come back because she pretty much is putting, Bill in danger. And so they escort her out. Haley is really upset, and Bill is upset at this point. Ashley, at some point, Ashley mentioned Naomi, and how Naomi would come up there and act if, she allowed him to just walk out and all of that. But she did say that she was going to go get his doctor to see if he would discharge him from the hospital. And then we have a moment where Haley is at the elevator and Ashley walks up, and Haley is saying, no matter what you, Naomi, and all of the rest of you think, I'm going to be with Bill until his last breath. And then she gets on the elevator and, she's looking at Ashley. So that's pretty much all for this episode. This was another decent episode. It was a lot going on. Lately, they've been having these episodes where it's been a lot of little conversations, between different people. And so it's just, it hasn't been really slow when they do that. So, like I said, this was a good episode. So far this week, the episodes have been okay. And, I'm looking forward to see what tomorrow, will bring up, because we don't know if Bill is going to get, let out of the hospital. I'm sure that he probably is getting out of the hospital at this point, because he's been in there since last week. And so I'm sure he's going to make a scene, and he's going to end up getting, out of the hospital. But let me know what you guys think about this episode. That's all I have for this Beyond the Gates recap. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you later.